Hello my friends, I am Sarah. Welcome to Grace in My Space. Today I have the first of a two-part series that is the most requested content I have ever had on my channel, and we are talking all about indoor plants. In part one today, I'm going to take you on a little plant tour of my home and tell you all the names of my plants, which is a very common question. And then we're going to talk about the best plants for beginners. So if you have never had or cared for an indoor plant, this is going to be your guide. And then next week for part two, we're going to talk all about all the beginner information that you need to care for indoor plants. We're talking watering schedules, soil type, kind of pot you should use, propagation, gnats, how to deal with the gnats, and much more. So stay tuned for part two if you are a beginner. Let's start today's tour with my prized possession, the Chelsea Hoya. I absolutely adore this plant. It is extremely easy to care for. I have propagated it and given some to my mom, who also has kept hers alive successfully. And it is just beautiful. It has these gorgeous, waxy, thick leaves, and it does not require hardly anything, which is my kind of plant. Just look at this beauty. Now, she needs to be watered. Her vibrance right now is a little bit low, little low luster, because she needs water. And that is one tip that I'm going to teach you next week in my plant care tips and tricks, because sometimes you just got to know your plant in order to know what they need. So stay tuned for that to come. In the meantime, let me show you a little journey of this little baby from the very beginning of getting her to now. It is a slower grower, so that is something to note. Also something that I really like about it, because I have a lot of plants that have gotten out of control. And this one just stays kind of prim and proper. I love it. I've also had it in direct sunlight, and then I've also had it in areas like this, where it's very much in kind of a shady corner. So it does pretty well in a lot of different lights. Next plant. My newest addition. This is called String of Turtles, because it looks like little teeny turtle shells, and it's super cute. The rabbit might be a little premature since I have 4 inches of snow outside, but you gotta bring spring in somehow. This little guy is very new to my home, so I don't know if I have any tips yet. We'll see if I can keep it alive. This is kind of like my plant corner. This is our southwest facing window, which is where a lot of the plants love to live because of the bright natural light. And so I kind of, you know, rotate as necessary. This guy is Peperomia Hope. There's a lot of different types of each plant. So when I say Hope, or like when I say Chelsea Hoya, those are very specific to the formation of the leaves, the coloring, if it's variegated or not variegated. So when you want to look something up, use the whole name. Next up, we have my rubber tree. I love my rubber tree. I wanted one for a lot of years before I actually bought it, because I thought they were hard to take care of. Guess what? It is the easiest plant in my home. And now, without further ado, the most requested plant name of my entire home, the creeping fig. This plant began as this itty bitty little plant that I found at the grocery store. I had no idea what it was. And through years and years of not letting it die, it now looks like this. And through that 5-year or so process, I have figured out exactly how to care for a creeping fig. And it's all on the blog. Check it out in my description and wait for next week for more details. Now, in case you can't tell, I am not one of those science-y plant people. So, if you were hoping for a very scientific and foolproof way to care for indoor plants, I'm not your girl. Because the cold hard truth is that there are no guarantees with indoor plants, and there's a lot of general knowledge that will help you, but it's gonna be very specific to each person's situation on whether or not that knowledge will work in your home with your lighting and humidity and temperature and climate and all of the things that go into making something stay alive. So if you live in Arizona in the desert and you never get below 60 degrees, your indoor plant care is going to look different than mine in Michigan, where it's freezing cold for half of the year. We have a lot of high humidity. It's just very different. So stay tuned for how that all translates to what you can do in your specific home next week's video. One thing to note, throughout the entire video, I pronounced 2 plant names incorrectly. I'm only human. I've always said pothos, apparently it's pothos. And I've always said philodendron, apparently it's philodendron. Philodendron. Phil. So now every time you hear me say it, just think instead, pothos. I like my version better. Next up on the list, we have a variegated pothos, one of my favorite plants. I need to figure out the species because I can't remember what it is, but I'll find it and I'll put it right here. This looks like it's in dire need of something to become more healthy. Stay tuned for that tip next week. I used to greatly dislike this plant until I figured out how to care for it, and now it's one of my favorites because it is so beautiful and I love the coloring. Now, one of the things that I want to do in next week's video is show you all the problems that most people end up having and then how to solve them. So if some of my plants are looking kind of sad, that's intentional. I did it on purpose. No plants were harmed in the making of this video. Another prized possession here, we have a Heartleaf Phylodendron, and it is way too heavy for me to pick up, but just look at it. Look at it. I have made so many plant babies out of this plant. It's gigantic, it's full, it's constantly growing, and it loves this spot. Next week, I'm going to show you specifically how to propagate this plant, as well as any pothos, plus some Monstera deliciosa, the delicious Monsteras, because I am giving some away to some friends, which is a really fun way to use your indoor plants as a gift so that other people can start their own indoor plant care collection. This guy is, what's he called? Staghorn fern. That took me a second. I got a couple of ferns. I'm not super duper successful with ferns, to be honest. They're kind of my nemesis. This guy is planted in the completely wrong soil, completely wrong, and it's still doing pretty well. So next week I'll tell you how you should actually care for it. I love how like shaggy he is. This is a collection of my favorites that I propagated and had nowhere to put them, so I put them all in the same pot. So we have some creeping fig, some Heartleaf Phylodendron, and some pothos all in one pot, which I really didn't know how that would look to combine different plants, but I think it's pretty. I'm not really sure that this plant needs any introduction, but nonetheless, my fiddle leaf fig. I got this fig when it was just a wee babe, and I am shocked that it is now taller than me. Ooh, we got some baby leaves. Oh, it's getting squashed. Okay, I do feel like I kind of care for this more than children sometimes. It's a tree-nager, aptly named. Not on the list of beginner-friendly plants, though I bought it as a beginner and learned a lot along the way, so it's tested me. Here we have a lot of variations of pothos. There's all kinds of different types of pothos that have different variation, different shaped leaves, different binding methods, or tendencies would be a better word. And I actually had a lot of different pothos and I propagated all of them and then I had nowhere to put them. This is a problem with me. So I put them all in one pot. Pothos is one of the most forgiving, beginner-friendly plants that there is. They do tolerate low light and they will do very well with most soil conditions if you are not really consistent with your watering. It's also the easiest to determine what's wrong with it if it's failing, which I will share with you next week with one of my very, very sad looking pothos. And now, welcome to the basement where my plants are neglected. I know I'm not creating a lot of confidence in next week's video on how to care for plants, but I just need you to know that it's a very realistic view of someone who has a life that does not revolve around making sure their plants are alive. It revolves around making sure their family is alive. That's my goal. The plants are a benefit of the household. They're beautiful. I do enjoy caring for them, but they are not first in this family. So if you want realistic indoor plant care tips, that's next week. Let's take a look at these ones for right now. We've got Monstera, Gigantor, not the technical name, just keeps growing, can't get it to stop. Jade Plant, Snake Plant, and Kangaroo Fern. Let's go in a little closer. Oh, I forgot. This guy was tucked on the ground. That's another pothos propagation. I have a problem. Let's talk about Jade. This plant, I need a different pot for it. This plant was gifted to me by a very good friend who inherited it from one of the leading greenhouses in our state at Dow Gardens. Very interesting story. I will save that for another time, but she asked me if I wanted it, knowing that I love indoor plants, and I was like, I don't think I can keep a jade plant alive, but I have. Most people would tell you that jade plants, which are a succulent, are easy care plants, but for some reason, I've had a very large struggle with succulents. I think I just love them too much and they just need to be neglected. So that was my method with this guy, and it's doing quite well. Now, I wish that it grew evenly. It's very top heavy, but again, it was this large when I inherited it, so not my fault. Now this is a Monstera. If this were to grow in the wild, it would be gigantic. It's a climbing plant, so it does need support. It is very easy care, but it grows quickly and it kind of is like out of control. As you can see, look at how big this leaf is. It's 3 of my hands. It's bigger than my head and it's touching my ceiling. So just something to note if you do want to get a Monstera, that you need space for it to grow. But it's very easy to care for and very easy to propagate. Over here, we have a snake plant. Snake plants, I was not a super big fan of when I first got it. I was kind of like, it's kind of boring, like it just sticks straight up. But as it grew and filled the pot out, now I really like it. One of the easiest plants that you can get, tolerates very low light and poor watering methods, and it will just keep rewarding you with new little sprouts. Now this guy, I'm gonna flip you over to my mom's house where she has the same kangaroo fern, but she has done much better caring for hers. As a leaf falls off before your eyes, I need to completely rethink my method of caring for this plant. I need to repot it. I need to, oh look, it's not attached to the soil, so that's not good. I need to water it better. I need to do a lot to make this come back to life. It survived beautifully for years. I moved it, I repotted it, and it just didn't like it. Revolted. But I know what I did wrong, and I know how to fix it. Regardless, it's a beautiful plant, but definitely not quite for beginners. Maybe like get a snake plant and a pothos first, and then tackle a kangaroo fern. Now let me show you in my mom's home Azizi Plant, which is a wonderful beginner plant. They can grow to be very big. They are very, very durable. They do not need to be watered often. They do not need high light, and they have wonderful, beautiful, silky leaves. Now over the years, I have had a lot of different types of plants, not even pictured in my home. Either they didn't survive me, or I didn't end up liking how they looked once they were mature, or their flowers ended up being messy and I didn't want to care for them. So there are reasons to not keep a plant. Just because it doesn't die doesn't mean you have to keep it if you don't like it. But these are the ones that I have kept for years and years, and I enjoy seeing in my home every day. They add a lot of interest and they add a lot of texture and beauty and just livelihood, especially here in Michigan where it is dark and dreary for a half of a year. So if you are looking to add plants to your home, these are my recommendations for beginner plants that are very easy to care for in this order. Pothos, any variety really. Heartleaf Phylodendron, just because I specifically love that type of philodendron, but any of them will be easy to care for. The Chelsea Hoya, snake plant, Azizi plant. If you're looking for large leaf, the Monstera is very easy to care for. Rubber tree, and a lot of people would say succulents. Succulents are easy to care for them if you don't overwater them. So if you want a plant that will survive your neglect, succulents are a great option. There are lots of other types of plants that are great for beginners as well. This is just where I would recommend starting based on my own experience. If you have a beginner-friendly plant that you love, drop it in the comments because I'm sure that everybody would benefit from getting a larger variety to choose from. And there you have it. That's a little tour of my indoor plants, plus some of the very best beginner plants if you would like to endeavor to try and care for live plants in your home as well. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure and hit the subscribe button to stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about all the things you need to do to actually keep them alive. I'll see you next week.